Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Mark O'Brien, Director at CM First Group, and I'd like to introduce everybody to our quarterly CA Plex 2E Communities webcast. We've got lots to talk about today, including some updates for our upcoming 13th conference next May. Also updated information on Windows and key components for our software modeling tools, and as well as 2 lightning talks, which one will be implementing a CI/CD pipeline for Plex, and lightning talk number 2, modernizing your TUI applications with secure APIs. The lightning talk speakers are going to be Lily Taharudin and Dan Majid. And you're familiar with Roger, our user group president, myself, and also John Rhodes, who is the CTO and managing director of CM First Group. I want to, next slide, want to talk to everyone about, we've got a chat console there that you can type in questions. So after the second lightning talk, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you can, you're allowed to compile questions into that area there, which will make it easier for us to go through at the conclusion of today's activities. So, as always, we have, again, here's our agenda: planning for the conference, IBMI and Windows compatibility discussion from John Rhodes, who was recently at the Common Conference and has the latest information there. And then our terrific lightning talks for Plex and 2E. So at first, as you know, if you've been on these before, we like to do poll questions and get a pulse from our audience. First poll question is going to be possible conference dates. We're looking at the idea of running the conference Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The format will be similar to what we've had in the past, where we have we'll have 1 day of technical training and then 2 days of customer conferences. So what I'd like you to know, Common is actually in April of 2023, so it doesn't interfere with that. As far as we know, there aren't any major conferences. So if you could select either the Monday, Wednesday, or the Tuesday, Thursday, or you don't have a preference, or you just can't make it that week in person, this would be very helpful for us. So 44% no preference, and we're split right down the middle. About a quarter of the people are with Monday or Wednesday, and only 4% can't make it that week in person. That's good. So we've got some stalwart community members on the who are voting this morning. I'd like now to turn things over to our Worldwide User Group President, Roger Griffith, who's got some updated information about the upcoming conference.
Thank you, Mark. So as Mark mentioned, we're just on the front end of doing the planning for this next, the 13th Plex and TUI Worldwide User Conference in Miami, Florida. It's going to be held the week following the Formula One race of Miami, so that'll be a fantastic opportunity for everyone who wants to come a little bit early and watch the Formula One race, and then spend 3 days with us at another Plex 2E Worldwide User Conference. Just want to mention that we're planning on having this conference hybrid, so you can either attend virtually or in person. Of course, we would prefer everyone to come in person and spend some time with your peers and just having a lot of fun in the Miami area. We're going to be announcing a call for speakers very soon, and we're going to be asking for everyone in the user community to please volunteer to share your experience with these tools with the community. Our speakers, we waive the conference fee. We give them a gift pack with some very nice prizes. We consider our speakers rock stars. they're treated very well and highly looked up to by the user community. So there will be registrations going to happen soon. We'll offer early bird discount for those people who can get registered as soon as possible. We'll post everything on our plex2e.com website just as soon as it's available. So please check that website regularly for more information. And really look forward to seeing everyone again for another conference. We've had 12 of these and they've all been really good. We're really excited about this 13th conference. So look forward to seeing everyone then. So I'm going to turn back over to Mark.
Great, thank you, Roger. Next up, John Rhodes is going to give us an updated report with the latest information about key components to the IBM I hardware platform. But first, we want to ask you a poll question about Windows 11, which is a setup for this. Obviously, we've got the latest information about that. And the poll question is going to be, are you running or generating Plex Windows 11 applications? And you can have multiple answers here. Yes, we're generating and running with no issues. Yes, we are generating or running with some issues. Third, still in the planning stages, have not implemented anything yet. And lastly would be that you're running non-Plex applications on Windows 11. So still in the infancy, obviously half of your planning. Quite a few people are running non-Plex applications on Windows 11, almost half of you. And just a few of you have started. So based on that, John, I'd say we're still in the infancy of Plex and Windows 11.
Yeah, sounds like it. Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to say a few words about it because it's come up quite a bit to our support center. First is, does Plex applications or do Plex applications work Windows 11? And I got some information to impart there. Broadcom did announce on May 17th that Plex was certified for Windows 11, so that's good news. You can go out there to your Broadcom support site. This is all public information. You don't really need to log in, I don't think anyway. And look at that statement about Windows 11, and also look at the compatibility matrix that they have down there as well about operating systems and et cetera, about what's compatible with Plex. There are some known issues that we found. We use Windows 11 quite a bit in the dev team and for customer projects, so we haven't really seen much in the way of issues ourselves, which I think is good. There is some couple things that are out there. If you're using Microsoft ActiveX, you may have to update that. Okay, and that's been since Windows 10. And with the Plex API, we've had some issues registering that on Windows 11. So if you're using the Plex API to go into the Plex model and do automations, you may have to run a separate reg server type command to get that part working. But besides those two fairly minor issues, we're looking, I think, pretty good on Windows 11. Of course, Broadcom's the final say on all this, but that's our view of it. General recommendation from Broadcom and us too really is that C++ is really end of life, starting to be sunsetted. So we really recommend people look at or plan to move to C# or Java with their Plex applications. That will be supported more long-term than C++. There's already some Visual Studio compatibility issues that are out there with later versions of Windows. But interested to hear what other people have to say. If you want to send in something on the chat or email us, we'll definitely distribute that to the community. So anyone has any issues or workarounds or advice on Windows 11 or Windows 10, yeah, please let us know, and we'll be happy to distribute that to the entire group. All right, super. IMI compatibility, that comes up quite a bit as well. So by going to Common and looking at the IBM pages, you can kind of keep up to date on what IBM's going to do with their operating systems. They just announced that 7.2 is starting to be end of life, so really need to be on 7.3, 7.4, 7.5. With that, you're not going to see any real problem with your Plex license when you move to new hardware, if you have to move to new hardware just for these operating systems. With 2E, there is possibly an impact. Mark O'Brien talk a little bit more about that in a second. But yeah, July 12th, there's an interesting announcement from IBM that there's new Power 10 mid-range versions out there. They put the big iron out earlier, but now the more small, medium business are being supported by Power 10. So as people move to Power 10s and start to move to later versions of the operating system, there may be some issues with Broadcom licensing and licensing with other software applications. Now, Mark, do you want to talk anything about that?
Sure, John. Yeah, so we at CM First have been working closely with ANI Solutions since Broadcom took over the CA Technologies assets, and we're working with a number of TUI and Plex customers around getting back on a maintenance, even if it's expired. We've been able to do business in all countries except the obvious North Korean places like that. But every place that Broadcom's doing business, software business, we can also do that as well. And then some people have come back on saying that they want more than just the maintenance or just access to licenses. So for those people, we also offer discounts on professional services and training. We do managed applications. We're even functioning as an IT department for some of the customers who don't have assets on the ground anymore inside their companies, or they've acquired, picked up a 2-year Plex application and aren't really sure what to do with it. So for any of those situations, we can be a help there. So let's get on we have an IBM poll question, then we'll get right into lightning talk. So poll question number 3. Which version of the latest IBM OS are you running? So it could be 7.5, which was just announced, 7.4, 7.3, 7.2 or older, or we're not using the IBM I, which obviously is possible with Plex and not 2E. Now, I wanted to thank our attendees. We have a really nice turnout today, considering we're in the middle of vacation season and people are getting back into airplanes and driving and taking vacations once again. Okay, can we see what the results look like for the IBM OS version? So 40% on 7.4. That's cool. 10% on 7.5. That's interesting. And 20% on 7.3. And then some people are still older. So just remember that's a non-supported OS version. And then some of you obviously are client server or cloud. So thank you. With those results now, we'll go to lightning talk number 1, which is CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery for Plex. And Lily, it's your show.
Hi, my name is Lily Taharudin. I'm one of the senior consultants here at CM First. Today, I would like to tell you about CI/CD. CI/CD stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Delivery, or sometimes also referred to continuous deployment. So this is the big picture of the CI/CD process. We'll start from the left-hand side, which is the continuous integration. So the first step is planning. So planning can be a bug fix or new feature enhancements. Once we have the task defined, whether it's a bug fix or a feature enhancements, we will start coding to complete the task. It is very important to create a unit test for every task that is assigned to the developers to ensure the quality of the applications deployed. So after the coding is done, the build process will kick in, and then it will trigger the unit testing. It will then be released to a QA environment for deployment. And then there will be an end user or QA tester that will perform the next two tasks on the right-hand side here under continuous delivery or continuous deployment. So the next two tasks will be the operate and monitor. And what operate means is an operational day-to-day task. For example, the end user might find an issue when they perform their day-to-day activities, like generating report, etc. Something might fail when they click on screens or buttons or something like that. And monitor means checking to make sure nothing goes wrong. For example, server crashing. So let's go to the next one. So what is continuous integration? Continuous integration is about merging the changes from multiple developers as often as possible. So we want to have incremental changes committed to our repository. And then the developer changes are often validated by creating a build and running automated testing against the build. When we do incremental integration, we can avoid challenges that can happen when waiting for release day to merge changes into release branch. So in the past, if we have a manual release, then we would have a lot of changes to be merged, and then in order to resolve the conflicts, it would be very, very challenging to do it after a certain point. Continuous integration puts a great emphasis on testing automation to check that the application is not broken whenever new commits are integrated into the main branch. And continuous delivery is an extension of continuous integration since it automatically deploys all code changes to a test environment. And there will be a human intervention or approval, which is a manual step before automating the deployment to production. So the two difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment will be there will be a human intervention for delivery, but there's no human intervention whatsoever for the continuous deployment. So from code changes release to production deployment, everything is automated. So why is CI/CD so important? Because we automate all the steps between the code changes from multiple developers to the code release into production environment by removing all the manual steps. So it'll be very fast, and you can detect any faults in early stages. This is a diagram of the components and stages that we use here in-house. So I'll start from the top left. So that's the Git icon. That is used very heavily during the development stages by multiple developers. Multiple developers will work on their tasks and commit all the changes to the repository on daily basis. And after they committed all the changes to the repository, the next thing will be the building process. So the building process, we would use what we call Jenkins as the product for the continuous integration server. So this will compile and build. So the output could be an exe file or jar file, and then we would deploy that to a QA environment or production. So there's the next thing that you see there's a Docker icon. So for those of you who's not familiar with Docker, Docker is a software platform as a service product that uses an operating system level virtualization to deliver software in packages called container. So you can have a Windows containers or Linux containers. What we mostly use are Linux for all the deployment, whether it's a WebSphere or Tomcat. And the last thing that you see there with the R icon, that is our artifact repository server that we use. It's called Nexus Repository. That is to store any kind of artifacts that are produced by the build process. So this can be a jar file or exe file that you want to store so that you can use it later, in any types of testing or something for other purpose. So what are the stages of CI/CD? First one is commit. The second is build. The third one is the testing, and then finally deployment. So this deployment could be, QA environment or production. What are the benefits and costs of CI/CD? So the benefits are the smaller code changes. Again, it's very heavily emphasized on incremental small changes. So when we do the building, we can find the error or faults faster and definitely better at fixing any kind of conflicts. And the process is repeatable and a faster deployment to production. And the cost of setting up the CI/CD, of course, is a steep learning curve to implement all this automation because there's multiple products to use, and we have to learn on how to write the scripts, how to deal with each of the continuous integration server, how to set it up, and how to kind of implement the process. And the last thing would be a legacy system rarely supports CI/CD. So it would be very extremely difficult to implement CI/CD on a TUI environment, unfortunately. All right, so let's start with the first components of CI/CD. So this is version control, which also refers to as source control. It is used to track and manage changes from your developers, any changes to the code. It will contain all the historical record from the beginning to the most current changes of every single file. You can do branching, merging, and there's also a traceability. If who made the changes, what changes are made, so you can always look at the differences between each version of the changes. And the most common example would be Git, Subversion, Bitbucket. So for the Plex developers, you would have a question of, what are the components that we would commit to the version control or the repository. So the components would be for Plex developers, for example, for the Java developers, we would want to commit all the files that are produced by Plex when you click on the generate button. So for Java, you will see there's an ob_func, ob_in, ob_out, panel resource, and resource file. And I think for the C++, you would have the CPP extension files. Those are the files that you want to commit to your source control. The next is automation server, which also refer to continuous integration server or CI server. It's a software that is used to automate the development process related to building, testing, and deployment. The ones that we use in-house are Jenkins, which is open source. The other popular one is called GoCD, which is also an open source. And the rest are GitLab, Circle CI, and Bamboo. So for the Plex developers, you would have question, okay, so what would happen during this automation building process? So these are the steps that you will see when you go to Plex and you click on the build. So these are the steps that we want to kind of mimic in the automation server. So for example, we want to compile all these Java functions into class files, for example. And for the C++, you want to generate your exe file. So these are the steps that we want to kind of do in the automation process. I'm just showing a screenshot here of how it looks like in Jenkins Pipeline Master. I'll show it at the end of the presentation on our own live that we have. But right now, just screenshot. So as you can see, we have several different stages here on the screen, starting from checking out from a source control management, and then build a WAR file, and then we would run a Docker, which means that we can deploy that to a QA environment for testing and the post actions. So post actions usually, if your build fails, it can send an email and notify your developers, the build did not go through, and you have to go see the log file and look at the error and fix the issue. So we just take a look at really briefly of Jenkins pipeline. So you have a question, what is a pipeline? A pipeline is a group of events of jobs that are connected together in a sequence. So I have a very simple example of the pipeline here with 3 stages. So the first one is the build. Those are the parts where we want to put all the codes to run the build process. Like I said, the steps to compile and build a jar file, for example. So those are the things that you want to put in the build stage. And the test would be usually in our environment, we would have the code to run the Docker. So we put the WAR file or the jar file into the Docker and then deploy it to a server. The next thing would be the deploy. So maybe you have something that's already deployed in the QA, everything went through with all your testing, and you want to deploy to production. This is the stage where you want to put that code in. All right, so we talk about Jenkins pipeline. So what it's Jenkins pipeline is, it has a suite of plugins with supports to implementing and integrating continuous delivery. There's also a script using a Groovy language written into a text file called Jenkins files, which in turn can be committed to a project source control repository. What are the benefits of the Jenkins files? It automatically creates a build process for all branches and pull requests. You can do a code review, or you can see all the iteration on the pipeline, also audit trail of the pipeline. It is a single source of truth, which means that everybody can view and edit that that project. If there's any part in the process that needs to be edited, then you can just go to the file and just make the changes. The last thing that we have here is artifact repository. So this is kind of optional, but I think it's very nice to have. It is used to store any kind of artifacts produced by the CI/CD. It makes them available for automated testing and staging and production environment. So there are 2 of the most commonly used for artifact repository. First one is Sonatype Nexus, and the second commercial version is called JFrog Artifact Repository. Okay, let me switch my screen so that I can show you the example of both of the servers that we have. So the first one is we're looking at this Jenkins. So I've explained a little bit of the stages here. This is written all in Jenkins file. And when you click on one of the iteration that we have, you can look at the full process, starting from checking out the codes, and then all this process, how it does the copying the file and compile, and finally uploads all the output to what we call here the repository. Let's see. Okay, I didn't need to log in. All right, so I just uploaded something this morning. So these are the output of the CI/CD, which is a jar file. You can just upload it here so that you can have a copy of your final output that you can use for any kind of purpose, whether it's debugging or testing or deploy to a certain type of your server. So typically, this Jenkins pipeline, you can run the build whether on a daily basis. You can start a timer maybe every 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, start the build, or you can do it based on it will build for every commits by your developer. Any kind of commits to the repository to the Git, it will trigger the build. So you can set it up however you want it. So just for an example, I just keep this build manually. Here, I'll just find something. So I just click here, build now. This is the manual process. So typically, you don't want to do this. You want to decide whether you want to do this, daily, nightly, or for every changes in your repository. So I'm not gonna let it finish because it's just gonna do the same thing. Just build a WAR file and deploy it to our QA environment. So if you have any questions about implementing CI/CD, please send me an email. I'll try to best answer your questions. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Lily. I'd now like to, I think we've got another poll question coming up after Lily's poll question number 4. Are you using a continuous integration or continuous delivery concept in your organization? So you get one choice here. Yes, we're running on all of our applications. Yes, but not for Plex or 2E apps. We're looking in the planning or research phase of CI/CD, or no, we haven't. It's really just not even on our radar, not a priority at this time. So while our people are voting, I just wanted to let everyone know that there's also 3 handouts at today's webinar, one for each of the lightning talks, as well as a PowerPoint that's got the slides that are in today's presentation as well. And as always on these questions, organizers and panelists do not vote. So can we see where does the community stand on CI/CD? So for 2/3 of you, it's not on our radar. That's and 21% are just planning and research, and about 13% are actually doing it on other applications or not. So I guess there's some work out there in terms of educating people, and we'll see if this topic makes the short list for the next conference. So again, thank you very much, Lily. I'd now like to introduce Dan Majid of Taharudin for our second lightning talk. Dan, you've never been on our webcast before, so welcome, and welcome to the community. Thanks.
Great. Terrific. Okay, before I do that, I just want to thank Lily. That was a terrific presentation, and CI/CD is so important. We're seeing more and more adoption of that in the IBMI world, and I just want to show you just one quick thing before I get into my presentation. And that at Taharudin, we actually manage all of our code using CI/CD pipelines. We use GitHub, and we use Jenkins for everything, and that includes all of our IBMI code. So if you look here, this is our GitHub repository, and we have all of our IBMI code up there. So you actually could put your generated IBMI RPG code, CL code, all of that stuff into Git and GitHub, and use Jenkins or Azure pipelines to do your builds and creates and deployments. So you actually can have a CI/CD pipeline that covers the entire environment. But anyway, if we have more time at some point, we could talk a little bit more about that. All right, so into the main thing that I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about modernizing and API enablement of the IBMI applications in a 2E environment. And actually, most of what I'm going to talk about applies in whether it's 2E, whether it's Windows stuff. So it really applies in any kind of development you might be doing. And it sort of, I always like to start here because there's this sort of belief out there that I hear a lot from executives that the IBMI and your 2E applications are sort of green screen things. They're limited to green screens, and it's a very closed environment. When the reality is, you can do just about anything with those applications that you can do with any other application. So you can do web, and you can do mobile, and you can do Internet of Things. You can do all those kinds of functions with your IBMI 2E applications. And in fact, the little screenshots you see here are actually screenshots from a 2E application that we modernized using APIs. And I'll give you a couple other examples of things that have been done. This is another customer of ours that wanted to have a web-based interface into their 2E applications, and so they were able to build this. This is a web-based application. It's actually built in a Angular framework for the IBMI application, and it allows them to get all their data in this web user interface. And it even has an API call out to their shipping carriers so that they can get information about exactly where a shipment might be at any moment in time. And that's all done via APIs from their existing 2E application. And because they were able to do that in a responsive technology, they have both a mobile and a desktop user interface into that application. So this is what their mobile user interface looks like for calling out. And what this does is it allows their customers to go and look for their orders, to get the order information on a mobile device, and then hit that track shipment button. And when they hit the track shipment button, it actually calls out to the shipper, and it gives them a map of exactly where the truck is with information about when that truck is going to arrive. And again, all of the communication there is being done via API. So they didn't have to do anything to their 2E application. They simply API enabled it and then used the APIs to talk to those applications from these new technologies. This is another customer that created a dashboard for tracking their packing racks. They put the stuff that they sent out to their customers on racks, and the customers would sometimes not return those racks. And so they wanted to keep track of how many racks did they have outstanding and where were they. And again, this was a 2E green screen application that they were able to put this very, very modern user interface around. So that's just a couple of examples of things people have done with their 2E applications. And the way they've done it is through this API enablement of their IBMI environment. So basically, they've wrapped their existing applications with APIs. And the advantage of that is you can continue to maintain the applications, to do all the work that you need to do, and you don't have to try to rewrite everything. You simply maintain the applications the way you've been maintaining them, but then you have these APIs that allow people to call in to execute functions on your system. So if they need to execute a program, they need to execute a function, they can call to that, and they can call using standard API technology. So they don't have to do something special just because they're talking to an IBMI. They can call in using standard web service technology. They do a call to a service, and then it goes to the API layer. The API layer then translates that into a program call on the IBMI, or direct access to a database table, or to a logical file, physical file, view, whatever. It does that translation. It translates JSON data into RPG parameters or into RPG data structures. So it does all of that communication stuff. So you have that API layer that translates everything to the programs, allows you to execute something on the IBMI and then get a result that comes back out to the web or the mobile technology or to whoever's calling in. And you want that to be bi-directional, so you can also call out. So you can go directly from your 2E application, like they were doing for that mapping application. You can call out to an API and say, hey, I would like to get where is my truck? I want to see where my shipment is, or I want to check my credit balance, or I want to do a credit card transaction, or whatever. You can call out directly from your code via the API so that you can execute functions on other systems or on other platforms. So the API middleware allows you to talk to other things, or to have other things talk to you without having to change your core code. And one of the things that IBM is doing a lot of work on is to make this very, very fast. And that it's really important for it to be fast, because if you're going to put an API call in the middle of a business process, you don't want your users to be waiting a long time for them to get a result back for that query. So you want to make sure that API access is very, very fast. And what's the other magic about this is that the users are able to create those user interfaces using pre-built components. So rather than having to write all the code to do a user interface, to do a progressive web app or to do a web interface or a mobile interface, you can simply go to a site like this. This happens to be the Angular site, and you just download the pieces you need. You need a button, you need a tree structure, you need a search function. You can just grab those components and put them together and create user interfaces very, very quickly. And then you access the underlying code via your APIs. The other really important thing about API enablement, if you're going to API enable your IBM I environment, your 2E applications or your core business applications or the things that run your business, you have very, very critical, business critical data in there. You might have personally identifiable information, so it has to be very, very secure. And there's an article today, actually, in IT Jungle about a lot of the security issues around the IBM I that are creating vulnerabilities for customers. Well, one of the other things that API layer can do is it can be a layer of security to protect your IBM I, so that the way often people access the IBM I is sending in user IDs and passwords on every API call. So they're sending credentials in on every call. The problem is if you're doing that, every time you send a credential, there's the potential it can be discovered. And if you don't want to make the user keep re-signing on, you have to store those credentials in their browser. So there's another place where native IBM I credentials could be discovered. So you probably don't want to do things that way. What you want to do is be able to use modern encrypted token-based communication. So using things like JSON Web Tokens, and you can do that through this API layer to your 2E application. So you don't have to worry about trying to write code to do things like OAuth for doing third-party verification or for managing JSON Web Tokens. All of that stuff can be done in the API layer. And by having it run through the API layer, you're not exposed to some of these security vulnerabilities that are identified around the IBM I. So you have an API layer that is protecting your system from potential attacks by ensuring that all of the communication is done in a secure way, and you're not sending those credentials up and down the wire all the time. And there are just a whole other variety of use cases. So the modernization one, that creating a new UI, is just one of the use cases we've worked with 2E customers on, but there's lots and lots of other use cases that people are using APIs for. So they're using them for things like doing internal application integration. So I've got a Windows application, I've got my IBM I application, I've got some Linux applications, and I want to share data and functions among them. By creating APIs, I can now talk through that API layer, and the API layer is doing all that translation for me between the different platforms. And I can use the same APIs that I use for the user interface to do the business integration. If I'm accessing the same functions, there's no reason I can't use those same APIs. Those APIs also allow you to talk to outside users. So if you need to connect with your customers and business partners, you can create APIs that allow them to send you data and for you to get data back from them, and they don't need to know anything about your 2E environment. They don't even have to know that that's what you're doing. They're doing it all through this very generic, well-known API technology. We're seeing lots and lots of companies who are modernizing their entire supply chain by API enabling all the communications, so up and down the entire supply chain. There are APIs available and being accessed, and you can participate in that by being able to call those APIs right from your 2E applications or provide APIs right from your 2E applications. You can also take advantage of things like putting your products up on things like Amazon or Shopify, or doing credit card processing, or using payment technologies like Venmo, or talking to your shipping providers. So lots and lots of companies provide these publicly available APIs that you can now access via that API layer. And if you want to add new technologies to your environment, maybe you want to write some stuff in Python, you want to write some stuff in JavaScript, you want to be able to attract new young developers, you can integrate things that are being built in those languages with your TUI applications. And you can take advantage of the literally millions of open source components that are out there that do lots and lots of useful things, where you can just download free code and use that code to do things. We have lots of customers that have done things like QR code printing and label printing using open source modules, or they create dashboards using open source modules, and they simply download the modules and then feed the data from their IBM applications directly to those modules. So there's literally, again, millions of these modules that you can download and use. And there are ways to generate these, so you can generate them directly from your existing environment. So point your API middleware to a physical file or table of view to a program and have it generate the APIs for you, so you don't have to write all the code to do that. And then you can monitor your APIs. This is actually the Swagger Stats monitoring dashboard. It's an open source component you can use to actually monitor all of the API activity. See what kind of response time you're getting, how many requests are you getting, what messages are you getting errors, so you can monitor all that stuff. And again, this is just an open source module. And you can create things like these dashboards where you can feed your real-time data into dashboards via these APIs. And this is just another example of a trucking company that created a dispatch application that talks directly to their native TUI application via these APIs. So you just need to think about are there things you'd really like to do, modern technology you'd like to take advantage of that would provide value to your business. One of the things you ought to look at is take a look at, is there an API kind of a solution so I can take advantage of that without having to rewrite my code, without having to make a whole lot of changes to how I do things, and yet I can still take advantage of all that new technology. So I know I covered a whole lot of stuff really, really fast, but basically that's just a real high level overview of the value of modernizing your systems using APIs. And I will turn it back now.
Thank you very much, Dan. I was around the world there in 10 minutes.
It was lightning.
It was a whirlwind. It was a lightning talk. That's the definition of it. Lightning in a bottle here. So we'll take control back over on our slides. Yes, so another poll question, now that you've seen that. So are you publishing or consuming APIs from IBM applications? So multiple choices are allowed here. So you can say, yes, I'm building an operating system built in or open source. Yes, I'm using Plex or CA API type facilities. Third, I guess that means assessing a third-party API or using a third-party API framework. And fourth is thinking about it, or as in Texas we would say, you're fixing to do it as soon as you get around to it. And last would be not on our radar. So this will be interesting to see where the community is on APIs. If you're familiar with our conferences, we did a mini conference on APIs way back in 2015 for Plex, only for Plex customers. And actually did a two-day session, 2 full-day sessions in Austin, and had people come in for that. That was when the games, the ESPN Summer Games were the X Games were performed in Austin. I'll give people a couple more seconds here to respond. And can we see the results of our 5th poll question, please? Okay, this is interesting. So actually for 40%, 39%, and not on our radar, but a fair number, a quarter of you are using either Plex or TUI APIs. 21% are doing it for other OSs or open source techniques, and 21% of you are thinking about it. And then 18 followed narrowly by third-party API framework. So it looks like the community is definitely aware and bringing APIs into their IT activities. That's very good to see. Great. So our last question, we're coming up just like 5 minutes left here. So really quickly, this is a common question that we ask at the end. We've given you a lot of information today, everything from the conference and Windows to Plex and 2E Lightning talks. So last question for everyone is Mint, meaning M means I'd like to meet on one of the topics. I means that I can introduce you to someone in my organization who might be interested. Maybe for CI/CD, that might be interesting. Or third, put me on the newsletter for the community, which comes out typically monthly. And then last would be T, knowing about another group or organization that should receive some of this information that we got today. So while you're looking on that, I've got some questions coming up. I know one thing we were looking at was Dan, for your edification, was how long, trying to get a sense for how long people have been doing things. So John, on the console, did we get any questions coming in from our people?
Yes, we do have a few questions.
Okay.
I have a lot of time left, but we have one that I guess to start with this one. It's kind of detailed, and Lily may want to answer by email. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It says, how does Git work with Plex group models? I thought that if there were multiple, oops, got cut off there. Maybe in general that how Plex works with or Git and Plex work together with group models. And again, maybe that's something you want to answer by email, Lily. I'm not sure.
We'll provide you with the email address and stuff, Lily, so you can do a response to that.
Okay.
And I had a question earlier for Dan. Hey Dan, what's the longest your customer that's been using APIs for the longest period of time?
That's a great question. So actually, it's a long time. We the original first thing that we actually API enabled. This is actually before I was with Taharudin, but it's the same technology under the covers. We had customers that were tying their change management system, in this case, the Alden change management system on the IBMI to issue tracking systems like Giron. And they were doing that through API. So they'd call from Giron to get information about what was happening in the change management system and put that directly into a Giron ticket so that they could track what changes were being made on the IBMI. And that was being done through APIs. And that's probably, I don't know, probably 11 or 12 years ago at this point.
Wow. Okay. Great
question. No, thank you.
Yes.
Said, will the conference be in Miami or Fort Lauderdale? Which airport is better to fly into?
We have not made a final determination. We got feedback that there was more people enjoyed Miami Beach than enjoyed Fort Lauderdale, but we haven't made a final decision. Personally, if you're flying in from the US, I think that Fort Lauderdale is just easier to navigate and get in and out of as an airport. But Miami, for international travelers, Miami is going to have more connections and more. There's more accessibility and availability there. So the airports are physically about 13 or 14 miles from each other. So, but Lauderdale is a little bit easier, especially if you're going straight out to the beach and so forth. So that'd be it. I don't know if we get any more time, John. We're at 1 minute here. So if any questions were submitted and haven't been answered, we will follow up individually with those people and make sure that you're looking at it. And thank you very much for your time. And please join us next quarter when we'll have the latest and updates, and probably should have some significant Broadcom news at that time with pending acquisitions and so forth and so on. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for our panelists, Roger, John, Lily and Dan. And everyone, please stay safe out there, travel safe, and have a great summer for all of you in the Northern Hemisphere. Thanks, everybody.